Hey guys, Hamsterwheel here with a new video, and a while ago I made a video regarding my leveling experience on WoW Freakz. And since I quite like this server, I decided to level another character and use that to do some dungeons here and gear this character up a bit. So without further ado, let's talk about my dungeon experience here on WoW Freakz. So my very first dungeon for me was a complete mess. My rotation was all over the place, and since I never ran any of these dungeons, I didn't really know what to do. I pulled around 25k DPS on average, which is quite embarrassing, and I was lucky that the healer saved my ass a few times, so yeah, there's a ton of room for improvement. In this dungeon I was lucky enough to get a nice new belt that will certainly up my DPS. Speaking of DPS, in order to get that up, I decided to look up Preach's Guide to the Assassination Rogue and spend some time on a target dummy trying to get the rotation right. After that, it was time for my second dungeon. This time around it went a little better, and slowly but surely I started to get the hang of my rotation. But enough about me and my crappy DPS. How was the actual dungeon experience? Well, for starters, the queue time was all over the place. Sometimes I found a dungeon in less than a minute, and other times I was waiting over half an hour for the dungeon queue to finally pop. I'm not too surprised about this though, since I am queuing as a DPS, so I expected to have to wait for a bit for some dungeons. Now, this being the dungeon finder, I unfortunately had several occasions where there was one person in the group who was AFK, or they were all tabbed looking at porn, or they fell asleep or some shit. So thanks for that, Mr. AFK in the dungeon queue, you're a dick. Anyway, let's move on to the groups themselves. I had several complaints on my first WoW Freakz video that many of the people here don't speak English, and to be honest I have no idea what they're talking about. People on World Chat stick to English 99% of the time, and even though people barely talk while in dungeons, because the dungeons are such a phase roll that communication is never really required, the few words that are exchanged are in fact English. And that's really my other complaint about the dungeons. They're too easy. I was doing heroic dungeons, and most of the time we never wiped and completed the dungeons in less than 20 minutes. I don't know what Blizzard thought about the heroic dungeons in Mists of Pandaria, but aren't they supposed to be hard? It's called heroic for a reason, right? Ah well, I guess I'm just stuck in the mindset of heroic dungeons in Burning Crusade. Another thing that I have to mention is that in all the dungeons I ran, I don't think I encountered a single bug. All the boss fights on the dungeons I did seem to work fine. They all showed the correct animation, the correct dialogue, and so on. I really gotta give it to WoW Freakz for this, since I was unsure how the dungeons were, but I'm happy to say that they worked just fine. So after a bunch of dungeons, my rogue landed at item level 458, which means I'm almost ready for a raid finder. I'll probably do a video of that in the near future as well, since people always said how it was piss easy, so I'm curious to find out if that's actually the case. Looking back at my experience in the dungeons, I have to say that it was a pleasant experience. People seemed rather friendly, the dungeons itself worked just fine, although sometimes I thought they were a bit too easy for my personal taste. Well, that's it for now. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamsterwheel, and have a good one.